seat. If you're out in the lobby, come on in. And let's open up this morning to Genesis chapter 41. Genesis 41. Father, as we open up your word, I pray that you would open it to us. That you would bring to my mind your thoughts, Lord, and that you would open your word to us. And by your Spirit, you give us understanding. And speak to us personally, Lord, not just corporately, but personally and intimately. And build us up, Lord, in our faith. And may you have your way with us. And as your word goes forth, may it accomplish all that you desire. And we ask this in Jesus' beautiful name. Amen. And amen. Well, we've been looking at the story of Joseph. And in Genesis 37 through 41, we've been considering his life. And we saw that in a moment of time, Joseph is moved from enslavement and poverty, and he is elevated to riches and power as ruler in command in Egypt, only second to Pharaoh himself. And as I thought about that, I thought, you know, there's a similarity here, but there's also a contrast with Jesus. And I thought about 2 Corinthians chapter 9, chapter 8, verse 9. And it reads like this. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich. And so, just the opposite of Joseph. Joseph was in poverty and enslavement, and he became rich. But Jesus, who was rich beyond what we can even comprehend, willingly entered poverty. And he did it all that we might become rich. As I thought about that, I thought about amazing grace and how grace transforms everything. In this passage here in 2 Corinthians, they're talking about actually giving. And the Apostle Paul, as he wrote to the Corinthians, was giving testimony of how the grace of God had touched people who were in poverty. And these people who were in poverty were literally pleading to be able to give and help others. And that's the way God's grace is. Have you ever been in one of those times in your life where you were just kind of in despair? And you just wanted to crawl back into your shell, so to speak, like a turtle will tuck its head back in its shell. And you didn't want to see anyone. You didn't want to talk to anyone. You didn't want to hear from anyone. You didn't want to pray. You didn't want to talk to God. You didn't want to do anything. You just wanted to get back in your shell for whatever reason. And then all of a sudden, God sneaks up on you. And the grace of God touches you on the inside. And you come out of your shell. And you're just overwhelmed with an amazing grace. A love that wants to reach out to other people and communicate and touch them and be involved in people's lives. And I thought how beautiful that is. What God can do just by a touch. When his grace touches you, it makes all the difference in the world. I was over at Home Depot yesterday. My wife and I were looking at refrigerators. After a while, they all looked the same. We must have opened refrigerator doors. We must have opened about, 50 different drawers. After a while, they all looked the same to me. I kind of like the one I got, but as I was there, the first person I ran into was Juan. And Juan was, had this big kind of a moving thing, and he pulled it around. He had this great big box on it. He was going to take it to people. And he was just joyous. And there was a life coming from him. And he's in the midst of a sea of people. If you've been out shopping here in the last couple of days, you know what I'm talking about, right? You can't get down the aisles. You're lined up. It's like being on the LA freeway. You're not going anywhere. And as I saw him, he was working hard, and he wanted to please the customer, but it was just a joy. Now, if I was to talk to him and ask what was going on, he probably would have said he had overwhelming joy. But I could see it. There was a life in him. And he was in a sea in the midst of all these people. And there's probably many of them that didn't know the Lord, And there God sends him out with this little thing that he's pushing, with the boxes on it, and bringing life to people that need it. And I thought about that as I was looking at the AFC, the Ambassadors for Christ. Good on you guys. Praise God for what you do. I know it may not seem like a whole lot to you, but you're touching a lot of people's lives. The grace of God is a transforming power. And he wants to give it away. It's the only way you can have it. You can't earn it. You can't work for it. You can't strive for it. You can only receive it. He wants to give it. He wants to give it to you, that you can carry it out and give it to somebody else. That's what he's been doing with Joseph. And in a moment of time, he transforms his situation from being in prison to being ruler of Egypt with Pharaoh. An amazing thing. And I thought about the amazing grace, the amazing mercy of God. A sovereign God who does what he wants, when he wants. And that brings us to verse 41 of chapter 41. So let's take a peek there in Genesis. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Because he could interpret his dream, and he gave him an action plan, and said the first thing you ought to do, Pharaoh, is you ought to pick somebody to carry out this action plan. And that's wisdom. And he said, well, who are we going to find more qualified than you? And so he says to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Really? Really? Do you think Pharaoh put him in charge? Well, I mean, technically, I guess he did, but ultimately we know who put him in charge, don't we? It was God. Pretty good promotion from prison to ruler in a moment of time. So what about you? Are you buried in some place that you think there's no help, no way out, nobody will be able to deliver you? I know somebody that can. I know somebody that can transform situations. But I say it happened in a moment in time, but actually it was a few years. 13. He'd been enslaved for 13 years. So it wasn't a moment, was it? It was a while coming. But it seemed like it was a moment in time. So he puts him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. And then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger, and he put it on Joseph's finger. And he dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command. And men shouted before him, make way! Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. You know, when I read that, and maybe it'll make you, maybe you thought of it too, but it reminded me of the prodigal son. When he was in the pig pen. You know, And then when he began to feel a need, he looked back to his father, to his heavenly Father, and to his earthly father. And remember when he was coming home, and the father seen him a far way off, and he ran, kind of unsophisticated, but he ran to him and embraced him. And then he put the royal robes on him, you know, and put a gold ring on his finger. And said, "Kill the fatted calf. We're going to celebrate." And it reminds me of that kind of a situation. And he was elevated from the pig pen to family. And that's what the Lord has done for us. He's taken us from being in the pig pen to being in his family. A royal priesthood. Wow. How awesome that is. You know, when the grace of God touches you and you can, that's reality to you. It's substance. That's such an awesome and beautiful thing. What God has done for you and me. Thank you, Jesus. You know, your heart filled with gratitude. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt." And Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath-Paneah, and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. He gives him an Egyptian name, that he'll be accepted by the Egyptians, and he gives him a wife. And you know, this is the only wife that Joseph will ever have. He gives him a pagan wife. She's a priest of Potiphera, priest of On. And a pagan woman, and that sounds a little odd, but I bet you one thing. I bet you this. She didn't stay a pagan woman. You know why? Because of Joseph. What kind of a man was Joseph? Powerful man, a godly man, a man that couldn't be influenced by Potiphar's wife. Remember? When she tried to take him and have sex with him, and leached hold of him, and he says, "No, far be it from me to sin against my God." No. And I believe that he shared with her, and I believe she came to God. I believe that she's going to bear him godly sons. So let's go further in it. Now, verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So when he's promoted, he's 30. But when he was taken into slavery and then imprisonment, he was 17 years old. So 13 years have passed. What kind of years have they been? Challenging, difficult, trying. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence, and he traveled throughout Egypt. He's going to take a look at what the task is before him. It reminds me of Nehemiah, when he was going to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. And he went out and he did an observance of everything that he was going to do before he put his plan into action. And I see this happening here with Joseph. And he travels around all throughout the land of Egypt. And then it says, during the 7 years of abundance that had been prophesied in the dream. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. And Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt, and he stored it in the cities. In each city he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Now when it says he took all the land, it's referring to all 20%, because we know in verse 34, look there for a moment, he says, "Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 or 20% of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance." So he takes the 20% of the food to save it. He puts it in storehouses where the source was, where the food was, which was a wise thing to do, and he does that throughout Egypt. And in verse 49, it says this: Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. Think about that for a minute. All the sand on the seashore. How much would that be? You know, have you ever taken up a handful of sand? Think you could count it? Try it sometime. Take a handful of sand and just try it. You could. And that's how much. He's got grain. It's unimaginable. And he stores it in these big storage bins. And it says, Joseph stored up the huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. And it was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Beyond measure. He's going to put this plan, and is putting this plan in action. And he's been prepared to do this work by God. And what was the preparation? First 17 years is going to be with his father Jacob. And you know what Jacob's going to do in a man's life? He's going to lay a foundation of trust in God, of revealing the one true God to him, teaching the scriptures to him, showing him how to walk by faith, laying a foundation in his life. You know, that's what we're called to do with our children. Now, our children, they may go along with the program. They might be easily managed. And they might follow the Lord all the days of their life. Or they may not. And they may go out into La La Land and live in the world and seek the things of the world, trying to find fulfillment in the things of the world, until they're convinced that they can't find fulfillment through whatever the world offers. Through sexual immorality, through people, places, or things. And then, prayerfully, we continue to come before the throne of God's grace. And while they're in the pig pen, they'll look back up to God as the prodigal son did. Many of us have prodigal children, prodigal grandchildren. And I got a word for you. Don't give up. Continue to pray. Continue to seek the Lord. Continue to draw near to the Lord. Why? Because when you draw near to the Lord, His heart will be formed in you, and your prayers will be effectual and fervent before the throne of God, and God will move heaven and earth to draw them to Him. Yes, still a choice on their part. But God can make it real rough by allowing sin to have its full bloom in our lives. I had a praying mother. I had a praying grandmother. Both of them hit the floor for a little time here. I remember laying in a prison cell in Mexico. I was dying. I have no doubt in my mind I was. At the very same time, my mother was in a little trailer in Prunedale, called Prunedale Dale, Park, on Vieira Canyon. God gave her a dream of me falling through the blackness of space on my way to heaven. And she got on her knees and she cried out to God at that moment. And at that moment I have a thought go through my mind. Oh God, if you get me out of this, I'll change. The prison door opened. A miracle. If I told you the rest of it, I don't have time to. It was a miracle. And I was free. Did I change? Yeah, I got worse. You see, sometimes when we look at our kids, we can think, you know, they've reached the point, but now they're going to turn to God. They've hit rock bottom. No, not yet. See, God knows when we're going to hit rock bottom and when we hit rock bottom. But we as parents, we don't want that to happen. God knows we don't want that to happen. Is there a parent in here that wants to see their kids hit rock bottom? But they have to. Till they learn. Remember the prodigal son? Nobody would give him anything. It took being rejected, turned from, nobody giving him anything, no help, no hope, anywhere, before they turned back to the one that they'd heard about as a kid. Keep praying, moms and dads. We have to hit rock bottom before we look up. See, that's a good place to be. And that's by our own choice. Verse 49. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand in the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping record because it was beyond measure. And before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. I like that. Before the famine hit, Joseph has 2 sons born to him by Asenath, the wife that was given to him. God gives him some time while there's an abundance. Before the famine comes, the 2 children are born to him. And this wife, Asenath, that name means she who is of Nath, N-A-T-H. And Nath was an Egyptian goddess of provision and protection. The Greeks called her Helena, and in the Roman culture she was called Minerva. And her likeness, get this, her likeness sits upon the United States Capitol building. Do you think maybe our founding fathers read the Bible? Her name was Provision and Protection. United States Capitol building, Provision and Protection. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Think maybe God had a hand in that? Do you think maybe this country has been greatly blessed and has been a light for many people? I think it has. I am just blown away by the mercy and grace of God. I think we've seen it in this election. I think God's given us another opportunity. I really do. Now, a lot of people don't. A lot of people think, oh, it's a nightmare. I don't believe that. I believe God's been merciful to us. So before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, it is because God has made me forget. God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. So, God names his son Manasseh, which means forget or forgetting. Forgetting what? The pain, the suffering, the difficulty that he was going through. God has made him forget. And then it says, the second son he named Ephraim, and said, it is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. And the name Ephraim means fruitful. And where was he fruitful? In the land of his suffering. And notice this, that the first son, Manasseh, is born first. And his name means forget or forgiving. You can't forget, or you can't be forgetting unless you forgive. Forgiveness in Joseph's heart was given. He could thus be fruitful. Fruitful where? In the land of his suffering. Folks, each of us go through suffering. Where? Right here on planet Earth. This is the land of our suffering. And God can make us fruitful in the land of our suffering. God is able to do abundantly more than we can ask or think, right where we're at, right in the midst of our trial and our suffering. See, sometimes we think, if I could just get this changed, if this child would do this, then I could have fruitfulness, then I could have joy, then I could have some happiness in my life. But it's not going to happen now because this suffering, this burden, this is going on. If only. Folks, you can't live in the land of if only. And live in the land of fruitfulness. In the land of your suffering, God is able to make you fruitful because the grace of God is transforming. It's an amazing miracle. As I looked at this, I thought about in the book of Hosea. Let me see if I can put my hand on this quickly. Chapter 2. Let me read this to you. In Hosea 2:15. It says, God is speaking through the prophet in verse 14, and he's talking about the nation of Israel, and he says, I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the desert and speak tenderly to her. And there I will give her back her vineyards and will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. And where it says the valley of Achor, that word Achor means troubles, suffering. He says, I will make the valley of troubles or suffering a door of hope. And so what it's saying here is their extremities are God's opportunities. Our extremities in our life, when we're going through suffering, when we're going through trials, we're in a valley of suffering, difficulties, we don't want to be in the place we're at, if only. God right there can transform and touch your life and do something beautiful if you will let him. Forgive, forget, right? And be fruitful. Only God can do that. He asks for your help. And what you have to do is ask him to touch your heart with forgiveness. Why? Because the individuals deserve it? No. But neither did we. Jesus was crucified on that cross for me. That's what broke my heart. In March of 1979, when I read about Jesus dying for me, I realized that I'd left him out of my life. That's why the things that happened to me happened to me. And I remember when I did it. I remember when I made that choice to eat of the forbidden fruit and take a bite out of that fruit. I chose that, and I turned my back on him. And so did you. Every single one of us. Separated from God. In desperate despair. And God, because of his great love for you, reached down and took you out of the pig pen and seated you next to him. Wow! 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 You're awesome, Lord! You're awesome! God is an awesome poor that we might become rich. Wow. We're just going to end right there. Brother Al, would you stand up, look at the people, and pray, close us in prayer, please.
Father, we thank you that even in our rebellion, Lord, when we deserve condemnation, you gave us your Son, Lord, that he didn't view the quality would use something to be grasped, but instead humbled himself, took on human form, came down to this earth, and suffered, not only scorn and mocking from us, Lord, but the cross, that he bore your wrath in our place. He died for our sins, Lord. We thank you that you raised him again. You count him worthy, that you've given everything to him, Lord. And at this time, while all his enemies are being made a footstool under him, Lord, and I pray that none of us would hold back, but that we would turn and receive the peace that we can have with you. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. You guys enjoy the Lord today, and if you're out enjoying Him, I bet you end up sharing Him. God bless you. Have a great one.